to keep the gas from coming up, which really it isn't a cohesive cementing job anyway, even under the best circumstances, because it isn't required to be. But even the way they were doing it, they lost thousands of feet. Well, instead of re-cementing the job, they fracked it anyway. And so, shortly thereafter, we saw gas seeping up in the creek. That's where part of that clip, where that clip does come from, is that time period when we could actually light a match to what we called a mother vent. It was about the size of a softball, bubbling with raw gas coming up. Of course, raw gas contains benzene, toluene, xylene, all kinds of toxic compounds. So it isn't just the frac fluid that we had to be concerned about coming up into the environment. It was also the natural gas. And boy, it was a monumental effort to get the state involved because, once again, there was a lack of regulation. But
your dad used to drink the water in your property?
Yeah, he's an outdoorsman, and he would spend a lot of time in the canyon. When we bought this property 20 years ago, we dedicated it as wildlife habitat, and, we'd looked everywhere all of our lives for a place that was quiet and peaceful, and we're very spiritual, Native American background, and so it's very important for us to have that connectivity with nature, and it has been constantly under siege since Encana came into the neighborhood. Our wildlife population has dropped to maybe 15 to 30% of what it was, and that's on any given year since they've been here. So we've found dead wildlife and an absence of wildlife. We found, I actually found and filmed a frog that I put on YouTube that was paralyzed in the most recent seep found in 2008. It was swimming near a gas expression, and that remains uninvestigated. So the fact that the EPA was taken off the job has been a very unfortunate thing. We have been largely unable to inspire our county, our state, the EPA, anyone to even conduct groundwater monitoring, where we've actually had diesel compounds come up near where that frog was found. So, which, by the way, I rehabilitated. It was pretty neat to be able to get that frog back on its fours and put it back in the water, but I felt kind of bad about putting it back in the same water. So,
your dad got sick?
He did. He died of pancreatic cancer several years ago.
At the age of?
He was 64, and there's no family history of anything like that. But he had been drinking the water, and we didn't know that the stuff was in it. And he always boiled it because, there's Girardia and other natural, bacterial concerns. But he had been drinking it for probably a couple of months before we found out that there had been this blowout. They didn't tell us. They don't tell you. You have to fight to find out what's going on.
Let me bring Joe Levine into the conversation,
okay.
Co-founder of Damascus Citizens for Sustainability and NYH2O. Your group, why you got involved?
We got involved solely on this issue. First in Damascus, Pennsylvania. I live in Brooklyn, but also live half the other part of the time up in the upper Delaware. And Damascus Township, some people came to me, some farmers, and said, we have an issue. And it was sort of a slightly sinister operation where landsmen were coming around and trying to sign farmers onto leases for gas drilling. So we began an investigation into this, and it was really quite easy to find out what was going on. There were thousands, hundreds of reports that we were able to find on the internet right away from Texas and Colorado and Wyoming and the West. And so we formed an organization there to try and get the word out in the upper Delaware, and then thought we had to sort of enlighten the people in New York, so we formed the NYH2O. And because New York is significantly impacted, drilling is targeted for the New York City watershed as well as the upper Delaware River Basin. In fact, the entire southern tier, most of the entire southern tier of upstate New York as well. And there could be 10,000 wells, 40,000 wells, 50,000 wells in this area that I talk about. And the impacts from this would be quite significant. And to allow this to happen in a watershed area, especially one like New York City's, but anybody's water supply, is potentially catastrophic. In fact, that's what the New York City DEP said.
The Department of Environmental Protection.
Yes, correct.
Let's turn to another clip from Gasland. This is Dr. Theo Colburn, zoologist and expert on chemical pollution from fracking.
Every environmental law we wrote to protect public health is ignored. And once the public hears the story, and they'll say, well, why aren't we out there monitoring? We can't monitor until we know what they're using. There's no way to monitor. You can't.
Well, Josh Fox.
I mean, this addresses, I think, what Waxman and Markey are doing. All throughout the nation, and this is in 34 states where we have this gas drilling happening. Theo Colburn is talking about the fracking chemicals. There's 596 of them. They are proprietary for the most part. We don't know their compositions. We know something about them, but the companies are not required to disclose exactly what's in those chemicals. The only reason we know something about them is because of Theo's work looking into what's called the manufacturer safety data sheets. Real detective work, and her being a chemist, looking into the health effects of those chemicals.
And you had the water analyzed as you traveled the country.
We did have quite a bit of testing. See, also in the 2005 energy bill, the burden of proof was shifted from the corporations to the citizens. So you have citizens all throughout these areas, which is a huge amount of the country, having to go out and try to prove on their own what's actually happening. And there is no talented agency like the EPA who is being able to go in there and do the investigation that's necessary. So people are doing things like getting their own water tested, finding those air samples. You have a mayor in Texas who did his own air quality study, which found 55 times the level of benzene in the air.
Wait 1 second. This mayor is the mayor of Dish?
The mayor of Dish, yeah.
Right. Dish that became famous. They renamed their town so that everyone in their town for 10 years could get a Dish network?
Well, right, yeah. That was a kind of a promotional thing, and it just so happened that he called me up. Yeah, well, he called me up and he said, this is the mayor of Dish. As I was driving, he heard that I was coming to Texas. Come and take a look at what we've got going on here. And all throughout the country, you have people who are conducting their own investigations. This is what I ended up doing in my...
And Josh, you begin and end Gasland with the companies testifying. Where were they testifying? Because now we're going to see congressional hearing.
Right. That was in a subcommittee hearing. I think it was the Subcommittee on Energy and Minerals. They were looking into hydraulic fracturing.
And they're testifying saying they don't want to be regulated.
They were, well, in fact, they've already had $140 million in the last couple of months arguing against what's called the FRAC Act, which is proposed by Maurice Hinchey and Diana DeGette, which would repeal the Safe Drinking Water Act exemption. And it only has, I think, 50 sponsors at the moment. So it's also, there's a mirror bill in the Senate, which is Bob Casey and Chuck Schumer, I believe. But the FRAC Act would restore the Safe Drinking Water Act, and it's something that we talk about in the film. And in this congressional hearing, they're arguing very hard that they don't need to be regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And as Joe was mentioning, all throughout New York State, and right now New York State is deciding what to do with their proposal for gas drilling, and in this region. This is a very, very serious issue for a huge amount of people's water supply. With these chemicals that contaminate in very, very small amounts. And just from what I saw going across the country in my investigation was that this was a problem everywhere I went. So that the fact that the companies are lobbying so hard against it, I think, and then in this congressional hearing, it's kind of amazing to watch. They get nailed. They really can't stand up under the cross-examination of Diana DeGette, which is it's really theatrical.
Congressman.
Yeah, the congresswoman from Colorado. It's incredibly theatrical too. It's a lot of kind of fun to watch. And for me, going from basically my back porch in Pennsylvania all the way across the nation to wind up in Congress and watch these things play out, and certainly now with Waxman and Markey's committee calling for an investigation into the chemicals, it's amazing to have watched this thing go forward. So I think when you're able to see the whole film, I think there's a kind of mystery involved that's really thrilling, and so it's great to be here to talk about it. At the same time, I think what I uncovered, or what was coming to me through all these other people who were talking about it, is this incredible threat, to the nation's water supply, but also to people's health. I mean, health problems throughout these regions are really rampant. So to me, this is really a public health story.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there, but I thank you very much for this journey you took across the country. It is truly remarkable what you have exposed. Josh Fox, director of the new film that won the Special Jury Prize at Sundance called Gasland. Joe Levine, co-founder of Damascus Citizens for Sustainability and NYH2O, thanks for joining us, and also Lisa Bracken, speaking to us from right near Divide Creek in Garfield County in Colorado. She's one of the people that, well, Josh visits in Gasland. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Back in a minute.